Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today, I have two phenomenal ladies that I've had the pleasure of knowing for some time now. Both of them are in the photography business, and they have taken some time out of their very busy schedules to come on board with us to share a little bit about their journey and the overcoming of challenges and adversities in life. So it is my great pleasure to have them aboard, and I would, without any further delay, I would like to introduce Miss Tyson Pugh and Miss Michelle Ray. Welcome to the show, ladies. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Joe. It's nice to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, before we jump into our segments, what I'm going to do is give each of you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourselves. You know, where you're from, again, what you do for a living, and anything else that you'd like to share, just to kind of give the audience a little bit of feel about who we have on the show today. So, I'll start with you first, Tyson. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
How did I know you were going to go with me first? but I am a. I live here in Dallas, of course, and I'm from a small town in Mississippi, of a population of about 5,000 people. And I've been in Dallas now for 25 years. I started at, I've been a photographer now full time since 2011, but I started out, I was a software engineer, in which most people are surprised, like you left that, but I knew that was not my calling. And just through prayer and just trying to figure out what I wanted to be, here I am with photography. I love photography. I love to be able to help people see the best self, their own best self. And I just love it. And I don't have any kids, not married. It's just me and my dogs, but I am a foster for for pugs. So that's just my little bit.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is awesome. And of course, I remember your early stages of going into photography full time. So you've really been doing a great job. I even have photos of my own that you've done for our family from back in the day. So that is wonderful. And of course, I see your pictures all the time with your fostering the pugs and everything. So that's just another cute element side of you as well. Same question for you, Michelle. If you would just give us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and where you're from. Go ahead.
It's funny. Anytime you ask someone who's connected to the military, that's such a loaded question. It's so hard to answer that. But in a short bit, I have been based here in Dallas for about 3 years. But before that, I lived in DC. Before that, in the Carolinas. Before that, on the West Coast, Seattle, LA, New York. I've been a little bit of everywhere, and I've also lived overseas. And I'm flying solo these days. I have two sweet little boys, and you'll hear a lot about our story as this podcast goes on. My eldest is 10, my youngest is 8, and my eldest has special needs, and that's actually part of my journey into photography. And I also love animals. I actually just told one of my good friends I would like to be a puppy foster mommy, because the commitment, I do have two kids and I understand commitment. It's a lot to take on a dog full time. Other quirky things, my business is eco-ethical centered. So my ideal clients are people that care about the environment, that reduce, reuse, recycle, organic, gluten, dairy free, vegan, green. There's a lot of holistic in my world. So partly because of my journey on healing, but also because those are my ideal clients, because I understand their ideal clients. So, for example, if I'm doing social media headshots and branding, it's really easy for me to connect with a chiropractor who's trying to reach other moms just like me, who've gone through the kinds of challenges that I've gone through with my own family. So, just a side note, that's not the biggest niche in Dallas, though. Sometimes I feel like a fish out of water, and but that's okay. I'm still here, and I'm doing my best to create a life that I love to live.
Well, that is absolutely wonderful. Great intro about yourself, and of course, I met you over social media, and that was one of the things that drew me to you is that your unique approach to photography, and you were also running a little contest at the time, and I just thought I was like, she seems really interesting. Of course, I had the pleasure of a few months back, actually meeting you in person, and we had a wonderful time together, just kind of getting to know each other and knowing about one another's backgrounds and things of that nature. So you do a great work in photography. You both have a very unique perspective and approaches to photography. So I thought that was just very interesting, and which is why, of course, for obvious reasons, I kind of paired you together, not only because of you having the same fields of work, but just the diversity in what you do. So, and again, the audience is going to learn a lot more about that because there's so much more to unpack about the two of you. And again, that's why I'm so excited about having you on board today. So, with that said, let's transition into that. As with any journey that you go through with life, you can't really tell the story without talking about, where it all begins. And so I know you've shared a little bit of snippet about yourselves, but I want to dig a little bit deeper to just kind of find out. And I'll start with you, Tyson. Tell us, what was it like for you growing up as a young girl back in the small town in Mississippi, fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as, like I said, if there's any particular challenges that you may have faced along the way that you'd like to share, please do that with us. We're interested in finding out a lot more about what that life was like for you growing up.
Mississippi is funny. Like looking back at things, you may see a lot of adversity, but when I was in it, because of the love I had, with my mom and my family, I didn't see as much. I realized like we were poor, but my mom, she would make things like always entertaining and making us think about things. Like I remember growing up, my mom would read me stories, bedtime stories. And then the older I got, she was like, okay, now you tell me a story. So it allowed me to become more creative and having to think outside the box. I grew up, my mom, I believe it was Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, all of that. It was so funny. And which that's what I love, the innocence of childhood, going to bed early, getting up on Christmas morning. Those are the things that I think about. I don't think about the adverse parts of it. And of course, when you get older, that's when I started seeing different things with my family. But as far as my immediate family, we had love, and we always shared creative ways of expressing ourselves and just having fun. And it's funny because we've always been able to laugh even in adverse moments. We can find humor in it, and that's one thing I appreciate about my family. And even with my grandmother, I just recall I wasn't there when she was on her deathbed, but they called the family in and they were like, everybody come in, and they're standing around, and my grandmother woke up, and they were asking her, does she recognize anybody? And her first thing looked over at my aunt and said, yeah, that's Wanda with my sweater on. So we were able to laugh about those moments. And that's what I love about my family and going home. We're still able to enjoy each other through laughter.
Well, that sounds like a very awesome upbringing, and it's always interesting to me, whenever I have guests on the show, to just kind of hear what their respective lives were like, because everybody's experience is different, and it's not always a bad thing, and that's okay. Again, it's a part of the journey; it's a part of what shapes and molds you into who you are, and so to hear about that strong family bond that you had, even in the midst of maybe finances not being at their best. Anybody that's kind of from our age groups, we're kind of all, not too far apart from one another in that regard. When you think about having difficult times financially, one of the things that many of us often speak to is that we didn't know we were broke. Because if you had that close knit family, it was like you just figured out a ways to navigate with what you had, and you made the most of it, and it felt just as rich, maybe not monetarily, but emotionally, in that connection that you have with one another. So I appreciate you sharing that. Same question for you, Michelle. Tell us what it's like. I know you've been traveling abroad, overseas, all over many states and places. Tell us, what was it like for you growing up?
Sure thing. First, I want to just jump on what Tyson said. Isn't that so beautiful that you got to tell stories as a child and now you get to tell stories with your camera? And it's just like priming you to do your calling. So that's so awesome. I love it. So similar, well, similar to my introduction, I grew up in Germany. My mom is German, and she married a black man from South Carolina, from deep, deep deep into South Carolina, and they couldn't be more different. She's like the prim and proper clean lady, and he's like dirty boots and trucks and, deep South Carolina. So that's an interesting dynamic just there. And then growing up in another country and, language, culture, upbringing, values. And I was exposed to a lot and I moved a lot. I moved from the US back to Germany. I mean, countless times by the time, and then all over the United States by the time I was 15. Unfortunately, I wasn't super close to my family, and I just never really could figure out why. And that sounds really funny, but I didn't know. It's kind of a longer story, but I just didn't know the dynamics that went into how my parents got married and all of that. So I didn't feel super close to my dad or my siblings because we're so different. I mean, we're genetically very different. But what I can say is every time I moved, I got involved, I made friends, and my friends and their families in many ways became part of me, or I became a part of their family. And that's a lot, that's the through line. Wherever I go, there was some unsettling, then there was connection,
And there was connection.
there was love.
There was love.
And that's what helped carry me through those difficult times. Then fast forward, I ended up marrying into the military context. So I was sort of primed for that kind of nomadic lifestyle. And those skills that I'd learned earlier served me really well because I'd jump in, I'd be a volunteer, or I'd get involved in theater, or I would connect in the community and give back some kind of way. And that helped me build relationships and have creative outlets, which ultimately later led me to become a photographer when, my life kind of almost like turned upside down. So really good fond memories include like Oktoberfest, Germany stuff, German chocolates. There's nothing better than that. Making German cookies for Christmas. We had a little bit of those traditions, but I was very sentimental. My family, they weren't quite so sentimental. In fact, my sister one time said, "Are you sure you're part of this family? You're so sentimental." Like, she like hit the nail on the head, right? But now, gosh, we are so close. We are so close. My sister and I, she's one of my best friends, and there's so much redemption in my entire family. My mom and I are so close. My dad and I are so close. If my brother were able to, you know, make that connection, I know we'd be close as well. So yeah, and it's like a surprising turn of events. It's not something that I had to strive for, and it's just part of the journey of just surrender, and then it just all came back. And so now I feel obviously really blessed because I have friends who live all over the world, all over the United States, and now I also have my family close at heart. It didn't start out that way, but that's where we've landed.
Well, that is a wonderful story that you shared there. Again, just the, I'm just still processing the fact that you said by the age of 15, just how often you moved and just what that experience must have been like. Just mentally, just embracing that. But at the same time, despite the constant back and forth and moving, I also like the fact that you pointed out how you just seem to just take advantage of those moments and making friends and making connections and and so you got creative with it, and that speaks to you kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier. It's just as well as Tyson did, is when you talk about that creative element, when you grow up in that, it was like the beginning stages of what your ultimate callings were, which is what you're operating now in with respect to photography. So it's like it may have seemed like a rough patch back then, or awkward, just kind of crazy and chaotic, but there was still meaning and purpose in it. And so that's what we have to embrace and understand, that we may not always understand in the moment why we go through what we go through, but rest assured there's something in it, and if we just give it time and we just are open to it, we'll find out that it's building and shaping and molding us into what God has created us to be. And in this scenario, you putting life on display by way of photography and delving deep into the emotions and the feelings of the moments of what those individuals that that you photograph, and the situations that they're in, and the messages that they're trying to portray, and those type of things. So that's a wonderful testament to you, to both, for both of you, to your upbringings, and how it's just already in the early stages of our conversation starting to shape and mold why you are what you are, and what started to lead you in that direction. So with that said, while that's all great and good, um, we do understand that, of course, you live life long enough, there is going to come a point where, and for some of us, there may be multiple points, but there's going to come a time when some of the adversity in life feels different than other adversities, where you sometimes there's a weight, there's a burden that's on your shoulders that is so heavy that you begin to question, even if you are a person of faith, even that you question, how am I going to get through this? This is a little different. This is a little bit awkward. This is a little bit challenging. I'm not sure if I'm built, if I'm ready for this, or is this the end of my story? Is this the end of my journey? Well, the one thing that we know for sure is that it's clearly not the end, because you're still here, you're still standing, and you're still in position. At least in this platform, we have the grace and pleasure today of getting a chance to hear what that is for you. So I'm gonna jump back to you, Tyson, and ask, when you reflect back on life and you think about adversity, tell me about a time, tell our audience about a time when you had such a moment where this was a little bit heavier and you weren't sure if you were going to make it through, but you were able to process through it. And again, you're here today to speak to that. So go ahead and tell us what that was like for you.
What that was like for you. For me, it was, I will just say this: when I was in college, I realized that the career path I was on, I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. I knew it from the beginning, but I was one of those stubborn people who said I needed to finish what I started. And maybe we can touch on that as to how I came to that, be that person to feel that way. So even coming out here, being a software engineer, I was on the path searching for my calling. Like, God, what am I here for? Because I knew it was something else. And so once I found it, I was already feeling stuck in the career I was in, and it was just, I mean, it was the living hell for me. And once I realized what I was supposed to do, it became even harder. Because I would stay up to 4 o'clock in the morning working on photos because I loved it. Time would just go by so fast, but I had to be at work the same morning. So I was praying. I was like, Lord, I don't want to leave this career without you in it. And I found out that they were going to be having layoffs. But actually, I found out in February that they were going to be having layoffs. So I was like, Lord, if this is your will, this is the time. I was like thinking like, okay, I can get severance. I won't walk away empty handed. And so I was let go. And of course, you're excited, but at the same time, it's very scary because there are so many unknowns. And I remember I felt like I was being attacked. And I was like, okay. But then I had people who were around me, friends. I remember one guy I used to work with, he called and he said, well, what are you going to do? You just got that house. You just got that car. What are you going to do? And I said, you know what? The devil is already trying to attack me directly. I don't need him using my friends to do it. I will stop talking to you if I need to. And that's the part, like, even over the years, of course, like, having a 9 to 5 job, working for a corporation, that as long as you're working, that check's going to come in. With the business, it's like working. You may still be working, but you don't know when you're going to be paid or when you're going to have a client come in. So it's still the ups and downs that I go through by being an entrepreneur. But what brings me back is having to think about what I've gone through in the past and blocking naysayers. And that's my biggest naysayer is me. And that's something I struggle with. And so that's something that I'm constantly working on. So whenever I'm feeling that way, I have to go back to my bases like, okay, let me remember a time when I did feel good. Where was I with that? And to be honest, that comes with my relationship with God. It it's that's my center. And when I'm not in line with him, that's when I feel the most like not knowing what's going to happen and feeling the anxiety of not knowing the next step or not knowing the future period. So yeah, so that's, I guess that's I don't know if I went over or talked about something or did I hit the mark as far as answering your question. So
You absolutely answered. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not looking for a particular mark or anything like that. I was looking for your story, and you shared that. And I appreciate, first and foremost, I appreciate your transparency in saying what you said. And I think one of the things that sticks out to me about what you said was when you talked about the coworker, you know, saying what they said, and they may have had good intentions, maybe, maybe not. And it made me think about the title. I don't know if you've paid attention to the title that I've given for our show today. It's from Photobomb to Photogenic. And I think about that that coworker saying what he said to you. That was a photobomb moment. He was photobombing your photogenic future that you have for yourself. And like, I don't need that photo bomb. You messing up a good picture with the negative energy. I don't need that right now. I'm very well aware that I got this mortgage and this car payment. I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware that I got a God who has always had my back and continues to have my back. And he's put a plan in my mind for me to follow. And he's rest assured me that I'm going to be okay, even though the situation may seem a little muddy right now. And so the last thing I need is your negative energy, again, whether you intentionally meant it or not. And if necessary, I will remove you from it altogether so you can stop photobombing my photogenic moment. So I just thought it was that stuck out to me when you said that. And I was just like, that's powerful. And then I like the fact that you were transparent about saying that sometimes, your biggest, hurdle, if you will, is yourself. And I think that a lot of us can relate to that sometimes our biggest obstacle is us, whether it's self doubt, whether it's fear, whether it's, overthinking things or what have you. And one of the things that I'm learning, even myself, as we, understand our walk with God and how he moves, is that we don't have to understand all the particulars and the details. All we have to know is who's in charge of the assignment. And just on that alone, and considering his undefeated record, that should be enough for us to operate within. So I appreciate that. And like I said, I had the pleasure of seeing some of your early journeys in branching off into photography. And that was without me knowing about layoffs or anything like that. And just so for you to step out on faith, that's an encouragement to me, to make that transition from career to calling, because that's exactly the phase that I'm in right now. It's like you got that career with the set money, you know what it is, and the good, bad, or otherwise. But then there's that calling that keeps drawing you, that thing that keeps saying that, hey, it's something over here. There's something that's bigger than the career. Um, and all of those unknowns can sometimes make you hesitant, can make you slow moving in what it is that you need to do. So I appreciate you sharing that, and just know that not only will somebody be blessed from hearing your story, but you've already, I can say I'm first in line of receiving a blessing from just even what you shared in that story. So I appreciate that. Same question for you, Michelle. Think about, if you haven't already, just tell me about a time when, again, this level of adversity and this challenging situation that you had, this was a little different. This is a little heavier than what you were used to. You weren't even sure if you're going to be able to pull through this situation when it happened. Tell us a little about what that journey was like and how you've managed to navigate your way through it.
Sure thing. So it was about 10 years ago. Was it 10? 9 years ago, we moved to New York, and it's a small military post at West Point. That post is meant for the cadets. There's not a whole lot of support for families there. I was pregnant with our second. My eldest was going through the throes of autism, but I didn't know what he was going through. But I have to back up because prior to that, I came out of a very strong religious ideology that was very heavy on power and control and authority. And so when these behaviors started manifesting with our son, first of all, I had no idea that autism, what it was really. Second, I grew up in a power and control structure because my dad was military. Then I married into a power and control structure. And then all the religious parenting stuff was centered on power and control and authority. That's all I knew. So when the stuff started breaking loose, we were all sick all the time. Turns out we had Lyme disease and we didn't know it. And then my big boy was having his issues with autism, but I didn't know it was autism. Then I had a little one who ended up in the pediatric ICU after a medical incident and medical injury. And so I had like crazy anxiety and I didn't know what was up. But also, based on my religious conditioning, I was taught things like if you just submit to authority, if you just obey, if you just follow God's way, all these things are going to go good for you. And you're going to be protected from the fiery darts of the enemy, like out there in the world. It was like this special protection program. And I really believed that. I really believed I could good my way into the graces of God, into his favor enough if I submitted enough, if I was perfect enough, if I prayed enough, if I enough, no bad things were going to happen to me. So you can imagine when all those bad things happened to me, it was a crisis of faith. The first thing that happened, I went inward. I was like, well, what did I do to deserve this? What am I doing wrong? Obviously, I missed something here. Or why don't I feel close to God right now? I feel abandoned by God. Again, must have been something I did wrong. Why don't I feel God's presence? And it was one of the times, it was like the darkest time. For me, I didn't have a lot of support structure there. I didn't have a lot of family support. I had very little support in my marriage at the time. So it was just a really lonely time. Out of that, I needed a way to kind of get out of my head because it was definitely an anxiety. I saw a counselor and stuff, and that's where the photography began. I got a camera because my second baby, he's a rainbow baby, so it's technically my third pregnancy, and I wanted to document every single moment because I was so sure then how fast it goes and how lucky or blessed I was to have another baby after going through a really bad miscarriage. So I got a camera, I started taking pictures, and this is for some questions later, but it helped me so much to listen to other people's stories and to know that I could be a part of listening to their story, encouraging them on their story, sharing a little bit on their journey, and then sharing their photos might encourage somebody else. Because, like, one of the first ladies I practice sessioned with, she was 44 and had just had her second baby, the 13th embryo. And it was an egg donor that helped her become a mother. I didn't even know what that meant, and just again, it's an honor to be a part of her story. But I also know the pain of miscarriage, right? And I also had the desire to have another baby, so I could really empathize with her. It helped me get out of my own head. So and actually, the first name for my business was A Rising Light Photography because it was a light in a dark place. And then my name later became Michelle Ray because I wanted it to be a personalized, but it plays on Ray of Light from A Rising Light Photography, but also Ray is in the middle of my then given married name, Garayua, Garay is in the middle. UA. So, and that's a really long last name for photography, right? Tyson would agree. That's a long name, Michelle Gary. You have photography. This is too long. So that is what motivated me. And the one last thing I was going to say. So I have an undergraduate degree in religion and Christian ministry and theater, and then a master's in education and interdisciplinary studies with a focus in counseling, and then a doctoral degree in education leadership with a focus in international affairs and student development. That's a mouthful. But when I got to West Point, I started taking pictures with my little cell phone camera. My mom one day called me. She's like, Michelle, I think you missed your calling. I said, what? I think you missed your calling. I'm like, no, I spent so much money on education and higher education. Don't say that. Kind of like Tyson's story. She's like, no, why are moms always right? Why are they always right? So here I am, years and years and years later, doing what I love, photography. And I get to meet people, I get to know their stories. I have the honor of being a part of their journey and empathizing with them and helping them feel uplifted and encouraged and confident. And that means a lot to me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That is a very powerful story. Just the challenges of motherhood um, and just wanting to share that with other people through photography, tapping into their experiences and their journeys. that speaks volumes about the kind of person that you are, and how you use some of your pain, some of your most painful moments in life, how you're using that to operate in your calling. And that's just the thing. I mean, there have been many times where I've reflected back on, I wish, if not so much that I hate that certain things happen a certain way or whatever. I just wish that when it came to the calling, that I pursued the calling before I pursued the career. Maybe some of the time that was wasted chasing money, or chasing, prestige and titles and things like that. What if you would have put that same energy into the calling that you have on your life? Where would you be today? How many more people would you have touched base and made contact with and changed lives for? But then, there's a part of me that says, you know what, it all still played out for a reason. And you were supposed to go through those early stages of what you did so that you can have a full appreciation for the calling. Because maybe I wouldn't have appreciated it as much if I would have started it sooner. And I think that would probably be the same for the two of you. And so, we don't want to question. We oftentimes we can go back and forth into the debate about it, but we don't ever want to question, God's timing and his way of laying it out. It may not always make sense in our human minds, but in the end, we know that he's a perfect God and nothing he does is about mistakes or errors. So it had to play out. We had to go through what we go through to get to the point that we're at so that we can operate at the highest level of excellence in our respective calling. So I appreciate you sharing your story, as well as, you, Tyson, as well, sharing your story. That those are both powerful personal journeys that I think, again, that's going to bless somebody. Somebody needed to hear that. Somebody needs to know that it's okay to shift gears. Yeah, we know how expensive college education is, and how we feel like, oh, I got to stick with this. I made this investment. I just can't throw it away. Well, you know, it doesn't even mean that you're throwing away. There's some skills from the software industry. There's some skills from some of your early works and your degrees, Michelle, that you can apply to photography. You just have to dig deeper and pull back those layers and find out what technical skills, what characteristics can I draw from that. I'm sure you already are pulling from that as it is. You just didn't know that instead of it being this title, it was supposed to be a different title. So you're just redirecting those gifts and those talents in another way. So that's awesome. So with that said, as we progress along in your journeys of life, and dealing with challenging and difficult moments, I am curious to know, um, what is your particular routine or regimen, if you will, that you like to follow that just kind of helps you deal with difficult times when it lands on your doorstep, whether it's a big thing or a little thing? Tell us what steps or processes that you like to go through that kind of helps you to keep your head on straight and stay focused as you process through whatever that challenge is. And I'm gonna throw it back to you, Tyson. Tell us what do you like to lean into?
Um, for me, I realize, and every time it's like sometimes it's repeating the steps, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not what I need to be doing right now. Because a lot of times it's like I need to go ahead and tackle this, but I'm not doing well. I'm not as productive tackling, whatever the issue is. And sometimes it takes just sitting down and just really relaxing before tackling something, because sometimes you can count, you can't see the forest for the trees. That's the way I feel at times, and it's just like, okay, what do I need to tackle first? But sometimes it's just stepping away, and I realize my thing is not actually taking time for me, the self-care. And because stepping away from a problem, sometimes that gives you more clarity than just trying to work your way out in it. So that's my thing. It's just taking time away.
I love that. I love that you highlight the self care piece, and just sometimes before we jump into, especially if it's a major upheaval, sometimes we just need to take a moment and just breathe, kind of gather our thoughts. So then that way we can be of open mind and we're not operating just directly off of emotions, but that we're doing so with a clear head and saying, okay, now that I'm settled, now that whatever initial emotion that I had about the situation, whether it was anger, sadness, or whatever, now that I've kind of gotten that out of my system, I can now hear God speak to me and tell me, okay, this is what I need you to draw from this, and this is the direction that I need you to follow. But if I go in with a clouded mind and I'm all overly emotionally charged and we're all worked up, then yeah, I might miss the message, or I might drag the process out longer than it needs to be, or get overly worked up about it than I need to be overly worked up about. So I love the fact that you pointed that out. Same question for you, Michelle. What is your process for dealing with challenging moments?
Gosh, that's such a loaded question. So for me, some of the bigger things that happened from then forward really caused a lot of traumatic stress because there was shock involved. So it's, the little moments, but sometimes it's the big blow ups, and you're trying to navigate both. What I realized is in the very beginning, I actually used my business as a coping mechanism, which it in some ways served a purpose, but there came a point when my body said, okay, we're done. We're done with you. Stop running. Sit with the feelings. Sit with it. And that was pivotal. It happened about a year ago. And I always say, I call it, that's when the bottom fell out for me. Before that, man, I was motivated. I was focused. I had head on straight. And then it's just like the bottom fell out. And this happens a lot with survivors of trauma. They'll go through their survival mode, and then as their body shifts into being really ready to heal, it says, look, I need to hit the reset button. But you can't be rerunning 100 miles an hour and hit the reset button at the same time, because it's in your best interest to not keep running 100 miles an hour. I'm pushing the pause. It's called burnout. That's what it's called. It's called burnout. And it's actually a sign of healing. It frustrates me to no end because I know where my head was a year ago, up to last June, and how motivated I was, focused I was, driven I was, plans, blah, blah, blah. But I have struggled a little bit. But in that time, I've adopted some new things. One, obviously, seeing counselor, every week. I do have a holistic life coach who I speak with every other week. I started reading more books about what's called somatic healing, and that's a little bit more in the body and not so much in talk therapy. I also keep a journal, and I like to write. So kind of like prose. I kind of do some prose poetry. And then I joined an adventure club because I realized part of my healing was I need to be around safe people. I need to see healthy relationships, and that's not going to happen if I stay isolated. So I did that, and I've done all sorts of fun things, rock climbing, all sorts of stuff, explored DFW. And then I also joined the dance studio because one of my passions is dance. And when my passion for photography, which started as a hobby, became my business, Tyson knows it's different. Is different. So then if you're creative, you need a new outlet for creativity that's your own, that's just therapeutic. So dance became that for me. So I was in the dance studio, and any chance I get for good, clean ballroom, oh man, I could dance till the cows come home. I can dance till the sun comes up. And there's nothing better. I mean, there's literally, I've never, done drugs or anything, but it's just better than anything that this world has to offer, in my opinion, in my book. It's just the true therapeutic, somatic healing experience. You believe it or not, your hearts beat in sync to that music. There's something healing about bands playing together, baseball teams playing together, tribes making music together, couples dancing together. There's something intrinsically healing just in the physical acts of doing those sorts of activities. So that's what I've adopted. So it's like on a micro level out to macro. There's no one specific way, but I try to adopt them all. And that's really been helpful.
I absolutely love that approach to healing and just dealing with challenging times. And I like the fact that you pointed out the need to sometimes that even for a creative person um, who's identified something that is their calling, you still need a creative outlet. And so for you to talk about utilizing dance or adventure clubs or just things like that, and also I like the fact that you pointed out therapy. We still, while we have made significant progression in that regard, for some, therapy is still a taboo thing. And that is especially so, particular in, in minority communities. Um, you know, um, I used to be in that same category myself of thinking, therapy is for crazy people, people who aren't, mentally on point and that type of thing until I, took a leap of faith into that. This last year, and it was, I would say, it's one of the best decisions that I ever made. And I make sure that anytime I have an opportunity to speak that, I try to speak that to say it's nothing to be ashamed of or anything like that. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It's just you exercising, as Tyson spoke of earlier, the self care. And sometimes that self care includes having somebody that you can tap into, whether it's your therapist, whether it's your life coach, someone who is going to give you that safe space. You spoke to that, Michelle. I need to be around safe people. That safe space where I can get away from, where I can take my frustrations and my pains and my hurts too, and not know, and to know that I'm not in a judgment zone area, to know that they're not gonna they're gonna tell me what I need to hear. They're not there to baby me and just and pacify me, but at the same time they'll do it with a gentle hand and loving care, and help me to figure out ways to process, to overcome those challenges that I'm up against, those adversities that I'm up against, so that I'm less likely to experience the anxiety moments, the stressful moments, the worry moments, the staying up all night moments, or even those moments of you perhaps taking the creativity that you use in your respective callings of photography and perhaps damaging that because you're so engulfed in it to try to keep your mind distracted from everything else, that now you've taken the fun out of it. You've made it work instead of the calling that is supposed to be a natural flow for you. So I appreciate you sharing that. So that is very impactful, and again, it blesses me, and it's going to bless somebody that's listening to that. So appreciate both of you and your transparency as you share your respective journeys along the way here. That's very impactful. That's very necessary. So thank you for that. So with that said, Tyson, I'm going to jump back to you. If you had an opportunity to speak to younger Tyson, that young girl who grew up in Mississippi, who did the right things of going to school and getting the college degree, only to find herself in a good career, but not but a career that wasn't fulfilling to you, and you knew that something was pulling at you, that you needed to make a shift, needed to make a change. What would you say to that younger Tyson? What would you say to others like that younger Tyson, male or female, who were in that same exact situation? They got the degrees and everything, but it's not what I want to do, but I know there's something bigger, there's something more. What would be your words of wisdom to that, and just the handling of challenging, adverse moments in general? What would you say to that person and to the younger you?
Okay, I mentioned earlier about how I I was adamant about finishing that degree because I finishing something I started. And the reason I was doing that is because like the older I got, like I told you, I had love in my family growing up, but the older I began to see things. And sometimes people will treat you well as long as they're seeing you in the same path that they're on. But anytime you kind of venture away from that, doing something different, then they will kind of attack you to try to keep you where they think you should be. So for me, when I was getting ready to go to school, after when I was coming up on graduation from high school, I remember having a cousin who's older. I have like my mom's the baby of the family, so well, the baby girl. So I have cousins who are closer to my mom's age. But I had a cousin, he came over to our home and told me that there was no point in me going to college, that I was just going to come home and work in a factory. And I remember telling him, I was like, if I do, I'll own it. And so a lot of the times I use what the negativity that people, put upon me, I use that as my launch pad. Like let me prove them wrong. And so, of course, I decided I was going to major in computer science, and people, of course, they're like, "Oh, what are you going to be, a teacher or a nurse?" Like, don't box me in. So I struck out to be that person to finish what I started. And so, even in college, like I said, I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. That wasn't what I was meant to be doing the rest of my life. So coming out in order to push myself, I remember like because I wasn't around that family, giving all the negativity, telling me what I wasn't going to do or what I couldn't do, I began to use that negativity in my own thoughts in my own mind to push myself to the next level. So for me, I would tell my younger self is what other people think of you is not your problem. And sometimes people will try to put limits on you because they're dealing with their own insecurities. And sometimes seeing that you're stepping out of the comfort zone that they consider comfortable is sometimes it reflects the the failures they feel in their own lives. That has nothing to do with you. Keep going. Keep being positive, and it's okay to switch directions. Don't feel bad about that. Just keep going. And the one thing I will say, I know you mentioned like our calling being photography. Photography is not my calling. I realized early on that my calling is encouraging other people. Photography is my medium. Because before I did photography, I actually became a certified personal trainer, certified aerobics instructor, because I wanted to, encourage people to become their best selves by getting healthier and, just improving their bodies. And so then I was like, okay, this is not it. But photography became that medium for me. So
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for clarifying. Because I think that's important that you made that point. Is that yeah, my calling is actually encouraging, empowering people. I just use photography as my means to do so. So I think that's a very important distinction to make. And I thought it's also interesting that you made a point about just even your certifications and with aerobics and other weight related trainings, because of course, and I know you didn't specifically share this story. I love the fact that you talked about not being concerned about what other people think about you. So for you to have, for example, have certifications like that, and once empowered and encourage people to be healthier and do healthier practices, you yourself, and I only know this because you've shared this journey on social media, you yourself went through a weight loss transformation. And so I can only imagine when you talk about worrying about what other people think, I'm pretty sure there probably were some people who knew you when you were doing the weight training and the aerobics and all of that. And they were like, oh, well, look at you now. And when you needed their encouragement and support, they had negative stuff to say. But if they saw the fact that one, you were bold enough to put your before photo out there and say, well, this is where I'm at. And then you move forward a few months later and you broke out the after photo and you were like, okay, check me out now. What you got to say now? I don't hear you. I hear crickets. I don't hear you saying nothing. That's powerful. That is powerful. And I know that wasn't part of what you shared today, but because I know you put it out there on social media, I felt comfortable in bringing that up. But just the fact, just that in itself, I thought that was amazing. And it gave me a whole nother level of respect for you to just to be bold with that. And again, to show that I finish what I start. And when I'm committed to it, when I believe in it, I do what I say I'm going to do. And you have transformed. Not, and that's not to say that there was anything wrong with you physically or whatever. You were just, again, at care, but taking care of me and creating a more healthy lifestyle. And in turn, you made a decision to rededicate back to your health journey. And so kudos to that, on you doing that, and just the boldness that you did with it, not worrying about what other people, because it was clear you didn't say it. I didn't hear you say those words, but it was evident in your post. It was evident in just even what you said today, that I wasn't concerned about what other people thought, or their opinions, or their signing off on this. This is what I wanted for myself. This is what I felt like I needed to do. And so I put it out there and I did it. I did a thing. And so for people who followed you on that journey and checked it out, whether you realize it or not, that's a blessing to some people. They needed to see and hear that from you, whether they heard it from you vocally or just heard it in your presentation of yourself, putting yourself out there and letting people know that I'm learning to love me more and more each and every day, and not relying upon somebody's approval in that regard. So I just wanted to throw that in as an extra added on what you spoke to. So just wanted to mention that. Same question uh, for you, Michelle. If you had an opportunity to talk to the younger Michelle, or somebody like the younger Michelle, who's been through some of the challenges and adversities and uphill battles that you've been through, and things of that nature, what would be your words of advice, words of wisdom that you would like to offer that younger you, or again, someone who's like you or gone through situations like yourself, to deal with adversity in a healthy and appropriate type of way?
It's so fascinating to do a podcast like this. And obviously, you're a photographer too, but I almost wonder, if we pulled in someone else in a creative, you know, heart centered, values driven creative, I wonder if there'd be so many overlaps or if it's just a divine overlap today. But similar things, two things that come to mind. One is you don't need permission. Number one, I would tell my younger self, you do not need permission to fill in the blank. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the second one is embrace all the healthy things, because I took my health for granted until I got very sick with Lyme disease and until I saw how health could be related to autism spectrum disorders diagnosis. So back to the way I grew up, it was a very traditional, patriarchal structured family life. And it was the only model, and very heavy on authoritative leadership styles. And it was the only model I was ever exposed to. And in the church life that I grew up in, very similar. None of the pastors' wives worked outside the home. There was no model for entrepreneurship amongst anyone. My mom, she was an entrepreneur from when I was in middle school, off and on. And then she ended up, launching her own business later when I was in my 20s. So what I would say, is you don't need permission, because there was all this pressure. You're either going to get married or you're going to be a missionary. That was pretty much it. Pretty much that was it. It wasn't even like either marriage or teacher, either marriage or nurse. It was either marriage or you're going to be a missionary, because that was the hyper fundamentalist thought in what I grew up in. I mean, some people consider it a cult. So there was Jesus was coming back. There was no reason to go get education. There's no reason to get a job. Just have kids. And there's nothing wrong if someone really, that's what they feel will bring them joy, get married and have kids. That's amazing. 100%, 1,000% amazing. But for me, I think I look to those external forces or voices or influences as a internal validation rather than just trusting my gut. So when I went into my 4-year degree, I wanted to study business. But I knew not one single woman who went to college to study business. Not one. My whole life. I had no example for entrepreneurship. I had no example for business ownership. I had no example for female leadership, period. There was none. There's a complete vacuum. So I would say go after that business idea. Find those mentors, men or women, doesn't matter. Find a mentor. And so if I could go back, so I studied religion and Christian ministry and theater, I would have found a school that had theater management. So would blend that managerial, the leadership, and blend the creative and pull them back in. You have to remember, this is like a long time ago, 99. So there's a lot more programs now than there were back then. And I'm sure there's a Christian school out there that would offer some kind of theater management. But if it didn't, that's okay. I wasn't going to lose my salvation by going to a secular school. But I was, in those days, I was terrified, of the influences of the world. I needed permission. My dad said, you can go to this Christian girls' school up in Raleigh or you can stay at home. Like, there was no in between. There was nothing else. So that's the first thing. The second thing is embrace all the healthy. So I grew up, I was a gymnast, and then I did some gymnastics, cheer, and then dance. I started dancing when I was 18. I was the 18-year-old ballet, the girl in the ballet class with the 10-year-old and the 8-year-olds. Like, thankfully, I'm really petite, so I kind of slid in there under the radar. But I loved dance so much that I paid for my own lessons as like beginner level 0, ground 0 at age 18, because I wanted to do it so much. And I wish I had stuck with it all the way as a passion, because I think in the highs and the lows, it would have been a really good through line along with my faith to kind of keep me both healthy and physically strong. Later, when I developed chronic Lyme, And in one of my Lyme treatments, I lost the some kind of weird thing happened with my legs. I don't know what it is. Nobody can tell me. And so I bottomed out in my Lyme treatment, and I had trouble walking. Like I would get so fatigued walking from one side of the house to the other at one point. So I needed to get a physical trainer. And then, of course, we changed our diet, AIP, paleo, organic, green, clean, all the stuff. And that definitely, I'd say, hey, do it, do it, do it, because it's so good. But I also got a trainer and she trained me, and it was one of the best decisions. I'd say, like, whatever you need, you're worth it. Embrace a healthy life. Don't take your health for granted. I never thought I'd get so ill that walking from one side of the house to the other would exhaust me. I took my health for granted. Um, but I've worked, and there's been miracles along the way, and I've worked really hard to claim my health. And now, when COVID happened and the whole world shut down, my trainer just trained me over the phone. And so, since now I have so many at-home workouts, I just love it, and I do at-home workouts pretty much every day. If I skip a day, I'm like, ah. But if I skip 2 days, no way, no way, no way. I don't like skipping 2 days. And it brings me so much joy just to find a routine that you feel you can stick with, young, old, no matter what size, shape, whatever background, find a routine you can stick with. Embrace all the healthy things and don't take your health for granted. Read and research all the things you can about health and wellness, because we age much faster than we think we will. And we're much more vulnerable to things than we think we are. Let's just be honest, right? So, yeah.
Well, that is awesome that you shared that, and again, putting that emphasis back on not taking your health for granted. I think that's a big part of good advice to say to your younger self. I know if I had an opportunity to say that to my younger self, things that I took for granted, I would have definitely perhaps shifted gears a little bit, maybe ate a little bit better, did a little bit better with exercise and things like that. Because as you get older and those symptoms and otherwise begin to manifest themselves in you, it becomes a little bit harder to drop the weight. It becomes a little bit harder to reverse certain things. And in some instances, depending upon how much neglect you've given it, it's not reversible. It's more now about what can I do to slow the progression of what I've created because I didn't take care of myself sooner. So I appreciate you sharing that, and just the overall things that you suggested about just you know the good words of advice. You talked about the dancing. Of course, I've seen your videos. You oftentimes will do little short reels and such, and put it in super fast mode. And she's doing all her little workouts and dancing. And whether she's having a ballet moment, or if she's having a ballroom dance moment, and just so you know, Tyson, if you've never seen her videos, she's speaking the truth. She's got some pretty good moves on her. You check out our different phases of dancing. Michelle is out there doing her thing. So it's good to see you doing that, and it's enjoyable, but at the same time, it's addressing the healthy side of you as well. So that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So before I let you ladies go, I do want to have an opportunity, of course, to celebrate, to acknowledge, to uplift some great and wonderful things that I know both of you are doing. And I want to give you an opportunity to share some of that. So I'll jump back to you, Tyson. Tell us if there's any interesting projects that you're working on, anything exciting going on in your life, anything that we can celebrate and love on you on right now about. Please do share that with us.
Okay, I am one of those people who I'll come up with ideas and then I talk myself out of them. So I've seen you've probably all seen where people vacationing in Santorini, Greece, or Italy, or even Jamaica, where they're doing these flying dress sessions. And I am introducing that to Dallas because not everybody can go to Santorini. But my thing is this: it's the flying dress experience. You don't need to be out of the country. There are so many beautiful places here. And so I want to highlight those and offer it to people like celebrating women who are celebrating milestones. I noticed in the year 2020, when we were hit by the pandemic, I saw more women starting to take themselves and treating themselves and celebrating themselves and not just being, mom, wife. They're showing things, doing things for themselves. So I want to be a part of that and helping other women to feel good at whatever stage. I've had somebody contact me who's turning 75. And I was like, of course, you deserve this type of session and this type of experience. So I'm really excited about introducing that to Dallas. And thank you for allowing me to share that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you shared it. And as it begins to develop and you get more rolling along with it, I would love to have you back on to just focus on highlighting that and see if we can kind of promote that out there. That's a wonderful thing that you're doing. And it's just further, expanding upon your creativity and just allowing God to use you in some new and exciting ways. So you just never know. As long as you're staying open and receiving of what God has to offer, He'll reveal things to you that you would have never thought that you would be doing that kind of thing, and then here you are. And my aside from that, acknowledging and affirming you and loving on you, of course, I will say to you, stop talking yourself out of stuff, because clearly you have a creative way about you, and I'm sure there's so many more ideas that need to be unlocked, or you've already unlocked them, or maybe you put them on the shelf because you were talking yourself out of them. So let your light shine, and don't worry about it. Again, what we talked about throughout the podcast is we're not worrying about everybody's approval. We're not worrying about asking permission. We're just going to do it. And if it doesn't work, okay. At least we have no regrets that we didn't put it out there just to see what happens with it. But we want to know that at the end of the day, when the heart beats for the final time, we shut our eyes for the last time, that we left it all out on the table, and you did everything that you could. You used all your gifts to the fullest. So appreciate you sharing that. Same thing with you, Michelle. Tell us if you got any exciting projects, adventures, anything that we can love on you, celebrate on you with you about that you're involved in and connected to.
It's like we're on parallel paths, Tyson. This is going to be so exciting. Remember how I told you guys I was like feeling like, am I burnt out? What's going on? And I realized that's just part of the healing journey. Doesn't mean I'm burnt out. I still love what I do. And I did make some shifts, headshots, social media, branding this past year. And I love that. I've got an in home studio. I love that. I started shifting to boudoir. It's not real boudoir, it's more, I call it femoir. So femoir is that perfect balance of femininity and the sensuality, but it's more along the lines of bridal inspired lingerie pieces. Very clean, very high end, very luxury. It's a very specific style, and there's very few people in the United States or the world that shoot this way. So I woke up a couple months ago, maybe 6, 8 weeks ago, and I just said, if I can't fail, what would I do? What would I do? Where would I go? What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And I just let myself dream a little, and like hashtag dream big. That's my advice to everybody. Hashtag dream big. Really let yourself do it, because that will infuse energy into your business, into your life when you just say, what about? So I did that. I said, okay, what would I do? I said I would shoot the thing. I would shoot exactly what I shoot, where I want to shoot it. And that's what I want to do. I want to go to Greece. I want to go to Naxos. Santorini is high on the list too. But I really want to go to Naxos because it's more remote, it's quieter, but it still has everything. But what I really want to do is shoot that bridal inspired lingerie with my favorite brand. So I'm working on a brand deal, hopefully brand ambassador. But guess what? Just like you, Tyson, I'm starting in Dallas first because there's some gorgeous places to shoot. I've got 3 models lined up who are brave. This stuff is just so beautiful and so elegant. Like you can see, it's just so elegant, right? But there's a lot of wonderful places you can shoot outdoors. And so that's the first step, shoot outdoors. I shoot film plus digital. So that's another unique thing about me. It feels kind of vintage, has a different kind of a feel, very classic. I love French high-end luxury couture, that kind of luxury line of wardrobe. And then I kept dreaming and I kept saying, you know what? I love this line, but they're not vegan. They use silk. And that really bothers me because I would love to have a completely vegan line, very much along this style, but eco-ethical friendly. If we could reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, if we could pull in fabrics that have been a part of something else, reduce, reuse, recycle, upcycle to create this look and feel, but in an eco-ethical manner, vegan manner, no animal dyes, no animal products. So I think my next step is trying to find a designer who can design the perfect lingerie pieces to go with my brand. and that I want to shoot what I want to shoot, and I want to shoot it where I want to shoot it. There are plenty of women who have a lot of income who want an eco-ethical brand and gorgeous images like that when they're on vacation. They're in Florida, they're in the Keys, they're in Greece, they're in Paris, they're in Costa Rica. Who's to say I can't be the family photographer, and let's add on an extra session for you, just for you. It's intimate portraits for women shot by a woman. This is all about you. What makes you feel lovely? What makes you feel confident living in the skin that you're in? What makes you feel amazing, right? I wish I'd done this 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, right? That's my only regret, that I didn't do all this much sooner. But if I look back on my work, I've always loved film. I've always loved that bridal lingerie line. It's always been a passion, but there was no real path to make that my business. There was wedding photography path carved out with specific educators, but no one's teaching you how to do this, and that's okay. I got to chart my own way. And I'm going to dream big, and I'm going to keep dreaming. And now that's giving me motivation and focus and giving me energy to get up and start working every day, doing my follow-ups, Facebook ads and follow-ups, and dreaming big helps me find more focus. But yeah, that's what I'd say, everybody. Dream big. Let yourself dream. What would you do if you couldn't fail? Just think about it for a minute. It really does bring clarity to your life and to your business.
Well, that is wonderful. Very exciting things that you're doing. And both you and Tyson. And if you would, Michelle, tell everybody if they're interested in any of your services that you do right now, how would they be able to reach you?
Probably the easiest way is just to Google Michelle Ray Photography, RAY Photography. It'll come right up and straight into there. There's a contact me page, there's my Instagram and my Facebook links. So they can DM me through Instagram. They can follow me on Facebook and send me a message. And the email goes straight into my email from the contact me page. Michelle Ray, RAY Photography on Google.
Same thing for you, Tyson. How can people reach out to you for your services?
Of course, you can Google me. My name is Tyson, and last name is spelled Pough. Or you can just reach me at my website is tysonq.com. And I have, like Michelle, I have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So, yes.
Awesome, awesome. And it sounds like these two creative ladies that I have on here need to be figuring out a way to how they could perhaps collaborate on something, because I think the two of you can kind of put your heads together, and whether it's blending something that you currently do or just coming up with something completely new. I think the two of you have displayed just some snippets of some things that you have going on, and I think you might have something there. I mean, perhaps I'm speaking that into existence, but I'm just putting it out there. I think you ladies need to make sure you connect and see if you can perhaps do some stuff together, especially since you're both local here in the area. Um, so, with that said, ladies, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. I've learned so much more about you. To already add to some fabulous things that I already knew, you just upped it up a little bit more for me. I know I've been blessed in hearing your stories, and I'm sure those who are listening to the podcast will be blessed as well. So thank you in your transparency and in the sharing of your stories. If you're interested in any products or services from myself, of course, you can contact me at blessingsinthestreets.com to check out my book as well as anything about services that I have to offer. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and what you've heard today, I do encourage you to subscribe, to like, to share, to comment with others that you feel will benefit not only from today's episode but from other episodes, because here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, it's all about encouraging, it's all about empowering, it's all about uplifting. So with that said, again, this is the Blessings in the Streets podcast. This is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and until next time, God bless, take care, and just remember, um, to think big, to dream big, to realize your dreams, to not let anybody dictate that path for you. And most importantly, just understand that even if you have obstacles and barriers and stumbling blocks along the way, that doesn't mean it's the end of your story. That there is a way to overcome that, and that there is something even in those those not so pleasant moments that you can draw from that will help to shape and mold you into being the person that God has called you to be, and the service that he's intending for you to provide to others to be of a blessing. So until next time, take care of yourselves.